The world had never seen destruction like this before. It began with a single bullet in Sarajevo, but soon, entire empires were burning. Nations collapsed, millions perished, and the map of the world was redrawn forever. This was not just a war, it was the birth of a new age, the First World War, the war that changed everything. In the early 1900s, Europe was a tense and complicated place. Powerful nations like Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia were all competing for control, power, and pride. Everyone wanted to be the strongest. Countries formed alliances, promising to protect each other if war ever came. These alliances were meant to bring peace, but instead, it created a dangerous web of loyalty that would soon pull the entire world into chaos. The real spark came on June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated by a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. To many, it seemed like just another political murder. But for Europe's great powers, it became the excuse they had been waiting for. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and declared war. Russia came to Serbia's defense. Germany sided with Austria-Hungary. France and Britain soon joined the fight, and within weeks, the entire continent was at war. What began as a regional conflict quickly grew into something no one could control. By August 1914, soldiers marched under the belief that the war would be over by Christmas. They wore bright uniforms, sang patriotic songs, and believed they were fighting for honor. But the reality of modern warfare was far darker than anyone expected. New weapons like machine guns, tanks, poison gas, and airplanes turned the battlefield into a nightmare. Thousands of men could die in a single day, not for land or glory, but for a few muddy yards of ground. The Western Front became a long, deadly line stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. Soldiers dug deep trenches to protect themselves, living for months in wet, cold, and miserable conditions. Between these trenches lay the infamous No Man's Land, a wasteland filled with barbed wire, broken bodies, and constant shell fire. Life in the trenches was pure horror. Rats crawled over corpses, disease spread quickly, and soldiers lived in fear of sudden attacks that could end their lives in seconds. While Europe burned, the war spread far beyond its borders. Battles were fought in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Millions from colonies and foreign lands were pulled into the conflict. Indian, African, and Australian soldiers fought alongside European armies. The war had become truly global. For the first time in human history, nations from every corner of the world were locked in the same deadly struggle. As the months dragged on, hope faded. The war that everyone thought would last a few weeks had turned into a 4-year nightmare. By the end of 1915, it was clear this was no ordinary war. The world was changing, and nothing would ever be the same again. The old empires were beginning to crumble, and a new, more dangerous world was being born from the ashes of the trenches. By the time the First World War ended in 1918, the world was almost unrecognizable. For long years of bloodshed had left Europe shattered. The once powerful empires that had ruled for centuries, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the German Empire, and the Russian Empire, had all collapsed. In their place rose new nations, new leaders, and a completely new global order. The human cost was beyond imagination. More than 16 million people were dead, soldiers and civilians alike, and another 20 million were wounded. Entire towns had been wiped out, farmlands destroyed, and cities reduced to rubble. Trauma ran deep. Survivors carried not only physical scars, but also mental ones. A new term was born, shell shock, now known as PTSD, describing the invisible wounds of soldiers who could no longer bear the horrors they had seen. When the war finally ended on November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., the world cheered. But peace did not bring comfort. It brought questions. How could such a tragedy happen? Who was to blame? In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles attempted to answer those questions. Germany was forced to take full responsibility for the war. It had to give up territory, reduce its army, and pay massive reparations to the Allied countries. This treaty was meant to bring justice, but instead, it planted the seeds of anger and resentment that would later lead to World War II. Meanwhile, the map of the world changed dramatically. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was broken into smaller nations like Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. The Ottoman Empire, once stretching across 3 continents, lost nearly all its lands, leading to the creation of modern Turkey and the drawing of new borders in the Middle East. The Russian Empire collapsed into revolution, giving birth to the Soviet Union, a new communist superpower. And across the Atlantic, the United States emerged stronger than ever. Stepping onto the world stage as a major global power for the first time, the war also changed society itself. Women took on roles they had never held before, working in factories, driving ambulances, and even serving as nurses near the front lines. When the war ended, many refused to go back to their old lives. This struggle sparked movements for women's rights and social equality around the world. Technology advanced rapidly too. Aviation, medicine, communication, weaponry all took giant leaps forward, shaping the way the modern world would live and fight in the decades to come. But perhaps the greatest change was in the human spirit. The world had lost its innocence. The old belief that war was noble and glorious had died in the trenches. People now saw war for what it truly was: senseless, brutal, and devastating. Writers, poets, and artists expressed this new reality through dark, emotional works that questioned humanity's purpose and progress. The lost generation, those who came of age during the war, would never see the world the same way again. In the end, the First World War didn't just end empires, it ended an era. It marked the beginning of modern warfare, modern politics, and modern society. It taught humanity painful lessons about pride, power, and peace, lessons that, sadly, would have to be learned all over again just 2 decades later. The First World War truly was the war that changed everything. The world was never the same after the Great War, and its echoes still shape our lives today. If you found this journey through history eye-opening, then don't stop here. Hit subscribe, explore more forgotten chapters of the past, and join us as we uncover the war's secrets, stories that changed humanity forever. Because history never truly ends. It only waits to be rediscovered.